Hello and welcome to another episode of CRT Sound System. And so we're talking about some Sunsoft games this week. It's episode 61. And we've got a quick little episode on Blaster Master, Mr. Gimmick, and City Hunter. Here with Reese as always. Reese, how are you?
I'm incredible, Tom. How are you?
I'm pretty good, yeah. Had a
How's
bit of
how's
a
Elliot?
just gone to sleep. For some behind the scenes stuff, we're delayed recording because I had to put Elliot down because he no longer desires sleep. So he's going to bed at 10 o'clock every night, which is great. I love it.
Elliot is
I
truly
love not having
becoming
an evening.
Elliot is truly becoming more and more Shadow the Hedgehog coded. You know, chaos chaos incarnate doesn't need sleep. Chaos
Yeah,
needs to climb all over everything and fall off of it.
absolutely. Yeah, and we've got a guest returning from previous Sunsoft episode that we had on Journey to Silius, and also the Frogger episode is Boin. Boin, how are you?
I'm good. It's nice and rainy where I'm at, which is great. A great day to stay in and talk about video games.
Hell
That
yeah.
sounds like a fine time.
Yeah, I noticed we're doing. There's a frog in Blaster Master as well, or Master Blaster.
Blaster
It's
Master. I always
Blaster
get it
Master.
mixed up too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I,
another frog game.
Hell yes. You are our Sunsoft correspondent, our Frog correspondent. Thank you once again.
Yeah.
You've entered the hallowed halls of our. I'm not quite sure who else is in it. Conky maybe.
Honky and Dave and I think maybe Teeps.
Teeps, maybe Roar. Um,
No, I think
But,
she'll be 3 times. I think in the next episode
for the
that we do
Outrun
with
episode.
her for the Outrun
Cool.
episode. Spoilers for next episode.
Yeah, thank you for donating so much of your time to the podcast. It's always wonderful having you on.
Thank you for having
Absolutely.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
and thank you
Oh,
for
go ahead.
bringing Gimmick to us and bringing Gimmick to me also. I've been so charmed and kind of blown away by Gimmick. These are three incredible games here, but I think the one people are least likely to know about, maybe not now that it's had its re-release and sequel, but
Mm,
yeah, it's three bangers.
yeah.
Uh, and I'm excited. I'm cranked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the gimmick is really interesting game, but we'll definitely get to that. So, based on what you were saying before we started recording, Boyne, you're not super familiar with Blaster Master, I assume. So, Reese, I'm going to get you to sort of give the rundown on Blaster Master. Because I'm also not super familiar with it. It's not a game I played until sort of emulation.
Yeah.
So I don't really have like any nostalgic memories of it as such.
Blaster Master is I don't know. I don't know if this is necessarily true, but I kind of feel that it's the non-Nintendo title that sort of busted the gates open for what the Nintendo could do.
Hmm.
It feels it's still a Nintendo game, sure, but the music and the sort of like the vibe is a whole lot more robust than most Nintendo games we're pulling off. And really, you're just a guy in a car, and you have these car segments where you're driving around in not necessarily an open world, but there is some wandering around that you can do. And then occasionally you get out of the car and have these top-down segments, sort of that you're just shooting around, and that's where you fight the bosses and you get your upgrades. And if I recall correctly, that's sort of like there is a slight Metroidvania vibe to it, where you can
Definitely, yeah.
you unlock stuff so you can go in the water, shit like that.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack, I think, has been what is the most enduring aspect of it, even though the whole game is sort of a put along the list, especially of non-Nintendo bangers, especially kind of early-ish. Like I think this was it was like 88. So it was after the black box era, but still pretty early on the first half of the Nintendo's lifespan. So I think this is a game that a lot of people remembered of having this like very different vibe than a lot of Nintendo games, very robust. Um, and I don't know, I get so transported nostalgically thinking about it and listening to these songs because it's I don't know, it's just one of those games I feel was everywhere when it was actually out and playing it. Kind of like I put in the same mind space as I do something like Contra, where it's like, oh, this game is a little bit more real. You're shooting guns. It's not the Mario goofiness, or you're not playing a game that's just called volleyball. So yeah, I don't know. It's certainly not one that I've gone back to recently. I haven't played it on an emulator for a long time, but it's quite remarkable. It has, and I think it's part of the testament to that is they made a whole bunch of sequels in like 2014, I think, that are kind of just sort of like that still retain that same vibe. Boin showed these to me, and
they're very good. They're generally well regarded as well.
Oh, okay, great. I'm excited to play it.
Because they're made by Inti Creates, who are sort of like the people you go to if you want to make a really good retro sort of retro shooter, or sorry, like a retro platformer. Like they made a lot of the later the Mega Man ZX games and things like that. Like so they're very highly regarded in the specific field of action platformers.
It also belongs in the class of games that have Shovel Knight as a character that you can for DLC, and I really love the idea of Shovel Knight driving around and getting out of his car. Anyway, sorry, what were you saying, Boyne?
Yeah, I was going to mention Mega Man. It reminds me of that, where it's like the formula works, so just make more like it. Don't try to convert it to 3D. It's a specific aesthetic and play style that works really well for 2D. So just keep it that way, and add additions elsewhere, add fidelity in cutscenes or in character design.
Absolutely, yeah. No,
that's a great point.
Got that vibe to it, yeah.
Can you imagine Blaster Master Legends? It sounds a little cursed.
I don't know. It could work.
It could work. Oh no, I just don't. No, just cut that. I don't want more Legends games.
You're not a fan of Mega Man Legends?
No, I like it just fine. I just it in my mind, Legends is such a beleaguered title that I don't want to curse any more games with the Legends the Legends curse.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like the whole sort of as you mentioned, this game sort of being a bit of a sort of a riff on action platformers anyway, sort of like, and it's later in the NES sort of lifespan, and it really sort of pushes the NES a bit, which I feel like is a very common thread when it comes to the sort of the Sunsoft games, is that like and certainly it's going to be a common thread with the three games we're talking about here, is just like how much they push their systems, whether it's through like graphics or just performance or even just the music. Like, and this to me is such a quintessential NES sort of sound. Like it's got that's very specific sort of pulsing bass that you get with the NES, and like the synth sounds are very very sort of quintessential to what NES soundtracks sound like to me. To the point where like I'm much more familiar with this game for its soundtrack than for anything else. Just because I have that set of CDs that I was complaining about the other day, where they released 4 CDs, each of them emblazoned with the letters from Sunsoft, but they never finished the set. So it's just Sunso.
I love it.
Yeah, but yeah, no, all those CDs have like just a bunch of different soundtracks, and most of them are from their sort of NES era, and there's a lot of really good stuff. To the point where I really struggled with this episode to sort of to cut things down, because I really wanted to focus on Gimmick, but I also wanted to do some more Sunsoft stuff, and I think we'll definitely come back for a second episode of some Sunsoft soundtracks, because there is a lot to get through, I think, and most of them are worth your time. So the music for Blaster Master was done by Naoki Kodaka, who we talked about on the Journey to Silius episode. He is sort of the main Sunsoft guy. Like, his list of games is pretty impressive. Now the second two games are done by a different composer, but it feels weird to talk about Sunsoft as a company and their music without sort of bringing up some sort of Naoki Kodaka stuff, because he is the guy.
Absolutely. Very. I for the Journey to Silius episode, I listened to a lot of other Nintendo soundtracks of his. And it's really like very consistently massive bangers, you know.
Yeah.
The game that's the kind of standout to me is his Platoon soundtrack, which incredibly fucking funny game to make a movie to make a game out of.
Yeah.
But also it's like it kind of bangs, and it's just like it's as Vietnam. It's not Vietnam coded, but sort of like has a good war vibe while also still being, you know, a NES action game. But just I think that it's absolutely the sort of maestro of Sunsoft sound as it's known more largely, even though it's sort of, he only has an appearance on a third of this episode.
Yeah. I think, as I say, if we ever do come back to do a Sunsoft episode again, I feel like he's more than likely going to come up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, you're just like looking at the list here, like Gremlins 2, Super Fantasy Zone. I mean, these are some crazy good games. Batman.
Yeah.
You know, just bangers all.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I suppose with that we'll jump into the first block of tracks anyway. So all of these are from Blaster Master. All very imaginatively titled. So the first track we played to intro was just called Area 1, possibly the most famous track from this game, just because it's the one you hear as you sort of start it. But then we've got Area 2, Area 3, Area 4, Area 5, skipping Area 6 to go to Area 7, and then we've got Boss 1 and Boss 2. One thing I love about the boss 1 and the boss 2 is it feels like they're just sort of boss 2 is the reverse version of boss 1.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and similarly, actually, Area 2 is sort of like that compared to Area 1.
Yeah.
They sort of feel like they're sort of weird opposites. It's interesting musical effect. Um, During the break, you talked a lot about the drums, Reese. So I think I'm just going to put you back on the spot there and give us your feelings on the drums in these games.
During the listening party Boin and I had to prepare for this episode, there was I don't know, it's something I've been thinking. It's occurred to me before, but it sort of really struck me the way Sunsoft's games, I think, utilize the percussion in NES games. Not to say that like other games don't, or something like I compared it to Capcom, where it felt like Capcom songs are a bit more like I think you remember them for their melody more than
Mm,
anything else. But I feel like Sunsoft tracks have such an interesting and compelling percussion going on. And like that's part of the whole vibe, and it's like consistently throughout the Sunsoft oeuvre.
mm,
And I think that's part of what makes it stand out and separates it as like its own genre of NES music.
mm.
Which certainly is true because a lot of the composers are a lot of the games share the same composer that we just talked about. But
Yeah.
um, I think too is that it does stand out in that way, and you can point. I think that you could kind of tell. I think I've heard people talk about the Sunsoft sound, and I think that's an
Yeah.
important element to it. Would you two agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's I think they did their own sort of like custom sound drivers and stuff like that for them that were sort of like in-house.
Hmm.
So I think because of that you ended up with that sort of very specific sound throughout the games. Yeah, and like I say, the drums in some of those tracks are absolutely fucking mental.
Yeah, I know Gimmick and Batman that you mentioned earlier use the same sound chip. I don't know about
Yeah,
these others, although late in life NES games tended to use more advanced sound chips for that really great sound. Um,
yeah. Gimmick uses one of those sort of add-on chips for the NES
Hmm.
that I don't. I'm not sure that maybe that Batman game has it as um, the FME7 is what it's called. Yeah, I don't think that's used in any of the earlier games that I'm aware of. But yeah, you'll definitely hear it when we get to the gimmick stuff. That like yeah, there's a much richer sound to those. It's sort of close to like an FM synth. Um, I don't think it's quite an FM synth, but probably I'll probably get letters on that.
Hmm. the I learned doing my research for this episode that Nintendo had very strict regulations on sort of like non putting chips and stuff in the carts
Mm,
during early on. But that restriction wasn't in Japan. Um, and then once you got kind of later on in the Nintendo's life cycle, that was relaxed. So while
yeah,
which is why when Gimmick had that its own chip, because it was such a demanding game, um, it was able to be released in other territories with that chip. Um, but yeah, I
mm.
don't know. I don't know if they actually did do that, but I think that was the idea. I think there's versions of Gimmick with a very stripped down sound. But
I
but
don't think it's the case with Gimmick actually. So that's true of Castlevania 3, which has its own custom mapper chip.
Mhm.
So you get that, you get the sort of the quote unquote better sound in the Famicom version, and it's a little bit more sort of stripped down in the on the version that was released in the US.
Mhm.
Um, and like Gimmick is sort of weird as well because it was only released outside of Japan in like Sweden or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
um, which is kind of a very weird situation. But as
Yeah,
far as I'm aware, the European version, the Scandinavian version, whatever you want to call it, that does have the same soundtrack.
okay, good.
And from what I can see here as well, so it's Gimmick, Gremlins 2. So Gremlins 2 does have the same situation where it had the mapper chip in the Japanese version, but not in the US version. And then also Hebereke and Barcode World, and also, as Boyne mentioned, the Batman Return of the Joker had that chip as well.
Hmm.
So one thing we'll sort of, when we move on to Gimmick, we'll definitely hear the you'll hear the sort of richer sound that comes from that. Or if you want to compare as well, like do go online, like go onto YouTube and look on like comparisons for like Castlevania 3 soundtrack. You can really hear the difference.
Hmm.
The other one that is it called Lagrange Point. It was a Konami or sort of a weird RPG, I think it was. That used an FM synth mapper chip as well to get like a really good sound out of it as well. Um, I'd love to get somebody who actually really knows about the mapper chips on someday to sort of go through them, because they seem really interesting. But it's one of those things where every time I try and look into it, it's just a cascade of numbers and stuff that I do not understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I am endlessly fascinated by it.
Yeah.
Boyne and I definitely were kind of combing through. There's a website that sort of just has every NES games, sort of like the various chips in the various regions involved, and kind of like
Yeah.
seeing what was in what chip. And it's interesting to see what has what, but
Yeah.
um, to go back to Blaster Master a little bit, just to talk about the drums just for a second longer.
Mm.
Um, I've talked about in the other NES episodes we've done how much I love the NES architecture, and specifically, I'm in love with the noise channel for some reason, and I love the way it's utilized in the Blaster Master soundtrack. Like it does a really good job of kind of like simulating these kind of like light touches on the drums and stuff.
Mm.
It's I think it's a very, it's especially because it's earlier in the Sunsoft oeuvre, so it but it's still like it feels very developed, and I think that's part of what makes an NES soundtrack sound robust, is the ability to program those songs in there, because I think it is, to me at least, it seems like it would be challenging to kind of like program in a tracker or whatever tool that they had, to just have, okay, we have these separate uh channels, and each one is doing its own thing, and together they make music, but they really, I think, interact really well, in a way that I think is very compelling, where it's not just three separate channels. They're each channel is kind of working with each other to create more instruments than I think could than channels that actually exist on the on in the NES.
Yeah, like that sort of that the way it uses the noise channel, and it's like the channels that the NES does have give it that very sort of specific sound that like is is very much the it's what you associate with sort of chip tunes, I think, broadly. Even as Boyne mentioned during the break, we were talking a bit about Anamanaguchi, and sort of like they were one of the early sort of um, chip tune bands to come out and be more mainstream popular.
Hmm.
And like they were sort of I think drawing on the NES sound as much as anything else. And like it is a very specific sound. And it really gives the NES, when it was used properly, a really interesting character.
Yeah, I had a NES, but I'm a little more nostalgic for the music the NES inspired, which was early Anamanaguchi.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But yeah, we'll move on to Gimmick now. So Gimmick, if you haven't heard of it, which is likely, is sort of an interesting game. I think it's another one that came out quite late in the lifespan of the Super Famicom, or the Famicom, I should say. Yeah, it came out in 1992, so it was one of these games that came out after the release of the Super Nintendo. Um, so for a lot of reasons, I think it sort of became it wasn't a big seller, and then it became this sort of um, this holy grail of retro gaming at a certain point. And also, as I mentioned, because it only came out in Scandinavia outside of Japan, it's something you don't see very often. I've never seen like a cart in person or anything like that. And it recently got a re-release, I think. Were you saying that, Reese?
Yeah, yeah, you can get it on Steam now, the special edition.
It got a PS4 re-release first, and I'm sitting here with the PS4 plushie.
Oh yeah, you showed me that
It's
the other
very
day.
nice. Still in box. I want to open it. I don't care about value. I love it. It's just too cute. I don't want to get it dirty.
Yeah. If you've not seen the main character of Mr. Gimmick, he's just a very adorable little green blob, sort of like a green Kirby, essentially. um, it's I think the first time I encountered it was actually seeing like a speed run of it. It's a really interesting game to see speed run actually, just because the way it's got sort of weird movement. Like it's got this very slippery kind of movement to it, that I don't personally like, but it's really, really fascinating to watch somebody who really knows how to play the game play it. Um, what's your sort of experience with the game? I know you love it, Boin. So maybe Reese, you can talk about your recent experience with it.
Boyne is the one who introduced me to it.
Mm.
It's just like, do you want to watch a fucking sick Let's Play? I was like, yes, yeah, I do. And it was really compelling and almost kind of like unbelievable at
Mm.
first, because it's one thing I'll say for it having tried to dip my toe into, it's an incredibly frustrating game, but if you can master it, it's got a quality to the movement that I think that is is almost, I can't think of another game like it on the NES. Because there's a lot to the way the little guy moves and the way you traverse the different screens. Um, and but also sort of like you create this little star that you use to bop guys, but then you can ride the star, and this
Yeah.
creates situations like you can just kind of like blorp your way through the game and just throw toss stars at enemies, and that's fine. But in the Let's Play, she showed me there was this there was a lot of tech and kind of a lot of, you definitely got to to master some of those later stages. You have to learn it a little bit. We're like
Yeah.
riding the star and jumping and kind of like interacting with the enemies. It's incredibly granular, and it has this flow to it that is very powerful. Like both the star and gimmick have this weight to them, and it's just super compelling. Um, I watched a GDQ speed run of Gimmick, and it was interesting saying that what the speedrunners were talking about, what drew them to it, is that they're like, yeah, we speedrun a lot of games, but the reason we love Gimmick is because it's a game where you can do the various strats and get a good time, but there's a lot of variation.
Hmm.
So and they were talking about like every Gimmick speedrunner has their own kind of like signature style, and it's a game that you and it's cool that the game is especially an NES game is able to exemplify that. And so it's really good, and we're not even getting to the music, which is fucking. It's an insane NES soundtrack. It truly is. It definitely is an example of like what you can do with sort of like the extra bespoke chips you can put on, that they did put on NES cartridges. And I guess the whole idea was they wanted this game to be not necessarily to be somewhat competitive with the Super Nintendo, right? With the Super Famicom, because it was in the last gasps of the NES system, so they just wanted to have something that was comparable. And I think it definitely is. It's incredible. Boyne, what's your I don't know what's your gimmick story? Sorry.
The game was kind of a staple of what I would call it early internet, although not that early, 2000s or even 2010s, like lists of games that would go around that like, oh, this is a really good game that a lot of people don't know about. Um, that playthrough I showed Reese um, has been on YouTube for a long time and used to have YouTube annotations, which so I guess it's sort of lost media. It talked about the creation of the game. It's where I first learned about the Sunsoft sort of audio chip that it's used also in the Batman game. Um, and how this was sort of a while the graphic design and the music design were separate people. The main developer was one guy who was, I think 19 at the time, and as a budding programmer, that sounded really cool. It's like hearing about Roller Coaster Tycoon written in assembly. It becomes an iconic game just for the fact that it exists and came out when it did. And I've been kind of into it ever since.
It's super cool too because I guess the story is that the programmer and sort of like Tomomi Sakai was kind of just he was doing good work, it seems like, but he was just an employee at Sunsoft a bit, and he was just like, I want to make my own game. I think I can do this better. And Sunsoft was like, sure, knock yourself out. And that's the stuff I really love learning about this era, because I feel like we talk a lot about sort of like the freedom the different employees had kind of like in these earlier eras of gaming, and it's so cool that they gave him this chance, and he just knocked it out of the park, and they threw I was about to say they threw a ton of support behind it, but I guess if they didn't release it in the United States, it was maybe not that supported. But
yeah, I think that's more due to the lateness of the game coming out than anything else, because I think everybody's like, oh god, well, we got to shift to the Super Nintendo as soon as possible.
I mean, we got that Yoshi puzzle game. We should have gotten Gimmick too. The Gimmick's better than that Yoshi puzzle game, which I hate for some inscrutable reason.
It's a weird game.
Talking about puzzle, is that Puzzle Attack?
Is it Yoshi's Cookie? Is that the one you're talking
Yoshi's
about?
Cookie.
Oh yeah, I don't like Yoshi's Cookie. I'm thinking of the Tetris Attack, which is
Tetris Attack, which is great.
Yeah,
we won't broke anything bad said about Tetris Attack in this podcast.
So some of the Blaster Master designers also worked on Gimmick. So the team is probably not as small as had been talked about online and as I had stated. But when you read interviews with the main designer, I know that all the audio work was done over the phone. They were on a phone call talking about the audio and plugging in their equipment into the phone so that they could show the music. So there was some, at least there was some distance and isolation between the audio designer and the main programmer or main designer, really.
Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, the musician who worked on this is a guy by the name of Masashi Kageyama. And from what I can tell, hasn't actually done a lot of video game music, so pretty much just did this and and Hebereke, which I mentioned, and the City Hunter PC Engine soundtrack that we're going to talk about later. I think that seems to be sort of all that he did. He was like a jazz musician, and then like after sort of getting out of video games, sort of just went off to be like a designer or something like that. So yeah, it's one of those sort of fleeting music sort of people that came into the music industry or the game industry and did a couple of soundtracks and then disappeared to live their lives elsewhere. Which seems to happen a lot. It's an interesting sort of path that some people take.
Well, Masashi Kageyama did make a grand return in 2018 to do the music for a game called Ophidius Summer Trouble, which
I was
which
looking
is
at that. Yeah.
which is a light erosion game. Sort of, you look at it and you're just like, this is like, damn, this is this big titty broad be in the sun.
Yeah. It's
so
one of the horniest
really
games I've ever seen, and that's saying something.
Really, you should Google that. It's a great time. But Boin, I wanted to circle back around to the plush because I realized I was reading the actual story to Gimmick, and you are living the story of Gimmick right now. You are currently in the prologue moment. Do you know what I mean? It's the story of Gimmick is that a girl gets the little green guy as a present for her birthday, and she loves it more than all the rest of her toys, and so the toys kidnap her, and the little green guy has to save her. So watch out for your other toys, Boin. Be careful.
I'll definitely do that. And yeah, it's really cute, marketable plush that's built into the game's story, and I'm not sure if this was Sunsoft or Nintendo. Someone in Japan thought that the character wasn't marketable to American audiences, which is insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know what the guy. I don't remember what his name is off the top of my head, but it really feels like Gallant to Kirby's Goofus in my mind. You know, Kirby's just waddling around, just like eating things, while Mr. Gimmick has to run around and ride stars and can barely survive, while Kirby is just riding the star to his next destination lazily. I mean, I don't know why I'm suddenly creating this rivalry between the two, but I'm committed to it for the rest of my life.
Fair enough. All right, so we'll jump into the first block of tracks here from Mr. Gimmick. So as mentioned, all of these composed by Masashi Kageyama. So the first track is Good Morning. Then I have Happy Birthday, Just Friends, Aporia, No Limits, and Slow Illusion. Before we continue to gush about this soundtrack, I do want to just sort of correct myself. So I mentioned we were talking earlier about the other games that use the same mapper chip on this. So while we're listening there, I was just doing a bit more reading. So it's actually only GIMMICK actually used the audio hardware on that mapper. The rest of the games use the mapper for graphic stuff, but they didn't actually use the audio on it. So apologies for that. But yeah, the absolutely incredible sound on that. Like it is an FM synth as well, as I've discovered. So it's a Yamaha YM2149F. For the nerds out there. Which just really gives it such a rich sound, and like the composer sort of having that jazz background as well, I think really allows him to play around with the sound in such an interesting way. Like the bass in on that on the boss tracks in particular were just like really rich and nice. I love it. Any thoughts?
I mean, it ripped ass. That's my thought. No.
Yeah.
It's really good. The bass especially, the chip is so powerful and compelling. It feels like it's one of the few Nintendo games that's just sort of like it's evolved beyond just like the noise channel. There's just so much going on with it that I don't know. It's I'm not surprised that this is a totally singular. There's totally unique technology around the sound to this game because it's hard to even point it out as a Nintendo game, right? It feels so complete, and it's really I think, the crown jewel of the Sunsoft collection. As far as I'm concerned, like obviously, I forgot his name. I apologize. But the composers uh, of most of the Sunsoft games that are excellent and sort of well known. But this is the highest high for me in Gimmick. And it's every time I listen to it too, I feel like the uh, the composer of Gimmick is apparently just a jazz musician and is like super committed to the jazz music scene, at least according to the Video Game Music Foundation blurb. And I feel like you can kind of feel that where it's not totally jazz, but it's a very jazzy, uh, very sort of complex like video game tune that still fulfills what you need from a Nintendo game, which is a certain degree of simplicity to match what's going on screen. But since Gimmick is more complex, its complexity of the music is dovetails perfectly. And I
Yeah.
wish I was better at the game so I could kind of play it. But the game, I love the game's design. I love the movement tech in it. The game is fucking evil. Like the third screen, it just dumps you right into a ramp into a pit from the pipe, and it's just like, come on, I can we give me a second? But it's anyway, that's neither here nor there. Um, but yeah, it's really engaging. Any thoughts, Boyne?
Just woof. Just great. Great. It's bubbly. It makes you want to play the game. It's uh like I can visualize each stage as I listen to the levels. Like there's a strong memory, strong thematic tie between a specific level, its setting. Like there's a level on a ship that's really kind of peaceful. It's a pirate ship, but it's got like kind of a peaceful seaside type of sound. That was maybe second to last, I believe. We got a boss battle. I believe that might have been a APORIA. It was the third to last.
Hmm.
And it's a very strong association there that really sticks with you. So yeah, kudos.
Yeah, as Reese mentioned, it's like it does the job of being a video game soundtrack really, really well. As even as somebody who has struggled to play the game, I don't think I've even managed to beat the first level of it. But like, yeah, it's very inviting in a way that's almost deceptive, I would say, because like Reese mentioned, the game can be just evil hard in places. But like if you're willing to learn the game and sort of and put up with it, I think then you sort of you do have that music then to sort of to keep you going and keep you engaged in it as well, which is always a benefit. And we were talking in the chat beforehand as well, Reese, just about the sort of the jazz fusion vibes that I was getting from this and from City Hunter. So like, yeah, like it's definitely it's definitely adjacent to that as well in that sound, even though it's a much simpler version of it. But like just the way the synths sort of are played and the way the bass is and everything like that definitely feels to me a lot like a lot of jazz fusion at the time, and that's not uncommon in general for video game music of this era to sort of be drawing from jazz fusion and city pop and stuff like that. So like it's not out of the way, but I think the fact that it's on the more sort of advanced sound hardware really allows it to have that sound sort of shine through in a really good way.
Boyne, you talked about this before as well, but you make a really excellent point about the nostalgia of Gimmick, and I think that extends to these other two games as well. Even City Hunter, which I only listened to the soundtrack quite recently. I think I just typed in City Hunter into our into our shared Discord, and that was it. But it's very very good at evoking that nostalgia. I think its place in history while not being too oversaturated and the sort of like with the complexity of it, I think and it's not quite as blown out as Capcom or Nintendo stuff. So this just has like Nintendo vibes, Famicom gamer vibes in a way that just are absolutely transforming. Even though like I think Boin showed me the game last year, like, you know, in the summer of some time, and it was and I still feel like that was 1,000 years ago in the best way possible. Just because of the way that the music, like, I don't know, is comfortable at being a bit more complex, and I think, you know, and allows you to close the distance to it rather than just being kind of overwhelming. Like, you know, in Nintendo music and sort of Capcom music, I think is a bit more sort of like in your face, these are the levels type things. While this, it's sort of like you got to approach it on your own, even though they're such huge bangers. And I think, I don't know, I think it's a super interesting quality to it, at least for me personally. I can't say it's universal, but I know that Boyne talked about the nostalgia as well. So I just wanted to mention that for a second.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. I think we'll jump into the next block of tracks anyway, and get some more Mr. Gimmick in us. Don't do that, Reese.
Sorry, I apologize.
Oh my gosh. All right, so we've got Paradigm, Lionheart, Cadbury, Identity Believer, Long Tomorrow, and Evidence of My Life. So tell me about getting to the last boss in this game. You mentioned a little bit of it, but I'm curious how the sort of what the way to do it is.
So we talked about the tech of jumping on the stars.
Mm-hmm.
There are hidden areas that you can only get to by sort of mastering the star jumps. Um, you don't just have to master the star jumps. You've got a little bit of difficult platforming once you make those jumps into the secret areas.
Okay.
And what you are doing there is collecting items from a little girl's room. Things like a mirror, a brush, maybe, and you got to collect all of them to actually get the good ending and free the girl.
Oh, okay.
But that also means fighting the boss. And that last one was if I recall, that last boss battle,
Mm,
which
interesting.
there's no real hint at the end of the game other than
I was going to ask, yeah, is there like a because I know some games when you don't get the true ending, it sort of gives you a little hint or something like that.
yeah, it's like a
Um,
sad ending, but there's no hint that there's another one.
yeah,
So, if you're not a game replayer, you might just think the game has a sad ending and move
yeah.
on.
And does the game sort of have exploration in it, or do you have to do it in one run through? You can't like backtrack and find the stuff that you missed, you know?
Yeah, you can't backtrack. It's really
Okay.
just you play through each. There's like a mini map that it shows you, and one of those songs was the mini map songs, but you
Okay.
can't move around the mini map. It's just visual between levels.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. No, it's a yeah, it's a really like interesting game. As I said, it's very frustrating. I find just personally, but like just from seeing people play it and speedruns and stuff like that, it does seem like the kind of game that if you're willing to sort of put in the time to learn how to play it, it could be very very rewarding. Um, so like yeah, I'll definitely go back to it at some point and give it another go just to give it another chance. I might pick up that re-release that came out recently. But you wanted to talk about the sequel and its music briefly, Boyne. So
uh,
I'll let you to talk about that for a second.
yeah. So they did the re-release, and then I didn't want to just talk about the music. I wanted to the re-release. The sequel came out in September, so
Yeah.
quite recently.
Mm.
It had
Mhm.
sort of like they didn't get permission from the original creator, and
Okay.
so
Interesting.
it was sort of a difficult um, development. I believe one of the main people working on the game went on leave due to burnout. The company, which was a Bitwise, it's Bit something, a Bitwave, they
Yeah.
got
Bitwave.
bought
Yeah.
out during development. Or actually, they got bought out, and that is what let them actually get the rights to the game. Uh, I believe that they either couldn't afford it or they didn't want to sell the rights to a small studio.
Oh, okay.
Um, but the music is David Wise of
Oh,
Donkey Kong Country. So
interesting. Okay.
I, uh, I would imagine the sequel is probably a bit easier. I read it's a little more streamlined. So
Mm.
if you struggle with the first one and want to hear some great music from a composer I would presume we all like, then
Yes. Of
Oh,
um,
course.
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think.
uh,
Yeah.
then go ahead and chase it down.
I'll
I
definitely have to
think I
check
think
that out. Yeah.
his anticipation theme is probably one of the songs that we linked to when we were first creating this podcast.
Yeah. I think
There's a
we
lot of love
talked
for
about that.
Wise in here.
There is there was also an arcade version that got released that it's Gimmick Exact Mix from Exa Arcadia. I have no idea how to play this, and I'm not interested in. I believe XA Arcade is like an arcade kit. So you have the kit and then you buy the exchangeable cartridges. So it's like a cartridge based system. Last time I priced it out, it was thousands of dollars for Gimmick itself. So it's not something you get for your home.
Yeah,
something you get for your arcade.
it seems sort of like a much more modern kind of like Neo Geo business model
Mm.
that I certainly question the wisdom of creating, but it does seem like there's some interesting stuff trapped on there forever. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. You get that a lot, I think, with the with more recent arcade machines that are basically just Windows PCs. I understand that they're quite difficult to emulate for whatever reason. Um, I think just because they're using like custom Windows stuff. Because the Technoparrot emulator, I think, is one of the few emulators out there that does those sort of PC based emulators. And that one is sort of locked behind a paywall. I think you have to subscribe to their Patreon for a lot of features and stuff. So like, it's clearly something that's quite difficult to implement properly when it comes to home emulation. Yeah, I'll definitely see if I can sort of track down some video of that, because that sounds really interesting. Like just the idea of getting one of these games that would play, that's like an NES game of its vintage, sort of redone for arcade systems.
They I am looking now. They did Yasify the main girl. She's like she's like not in jammies anymore. She's in more like a not exactly a schoolgirl outfit, but kind of.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah, when before she's in like her jammies.
yeah, that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of kind of unless you're interested in paying thousands of dollars for the yassified girl, it seems that a lot of what it has to offer you get in the re-release on Steam,
Mm,
except maybe like it has its own special widescreen menu that you get. So I would say that you are not really missing much if you get the re-release at this point, but
mm.
it's definitely an interesting thing with I think it has its own version of the music too. So
It
that's
does. It
certainly
looks like, yeah, it looks like it's an arranged soundtrack, which I'll definitely have to see if I can track down.
Mhm. I have to admit I'm a little less interested in Gimmick 2 than I am exploring. I'd have to really master Gimmick before I look into Gimmick 2. It
Mm,
it um it does feel like Gimmick 2 has lost something in the sort of like updated art style a little bit for me. And I don't know. It you're still doing all the same stuff, but it seems like it's a lot less mean
mm.
on the face. So that could, I'm sure that there's some challenge once you get into it.
Yeah.
But I would definitely I think during the autumn sale it was like $7 on sale. So
Mm,
pick that up for
yeah.
sure.
No, it's good that it's sort of available, because like I mentioned, it was a late or a late Famicom game. Um, so like it was already very sort of difficult to get a hold of, I think. Um, so definitely support any sort of things like this where people are bringing out games that are difficult to get a hold of. Like I think
Yeah.
that's always an unequivocal good.
Yeah, and before we move on, I just want to talk about w- go back to what we were talking about for a second in terms of like the difficulty until the threshold you reach with Gimmick that I have
Mm.
not reached at all. But it really seems like a game with a very discernible flow state that I love. It seems like it's really difficult and onerous until you really master the star riding and platforming. Then it almost feels like, a skateboarding game or something. It really feels like, oh, you're kick flipping off the star onto this platform to jump up to this crazy area that's just like a gap in the ceiling, like you wouldn't even know, except that it's uh you know that the game has those things in it. And I don't know. I think that there's something very compelling, especially for a Famicom game. It's a Famicom game that wanted to compete, wanted to punch above its weight, and I think it really does, because of stuff like that. And like I look at that, and I look at people who are good at the game, and it definitely feels like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, where you're just rocking and rolling through the game, and if you go beneath that flow threshold, you can start stumbling real bad, real fast. But
Yeah.
I don't know, it rips.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I
yeah,
think that's why I find it so enjoyable as a game to watch rather than one to play.
yeah.
Because like skills play of this game is absolutely incredible to see because there's the movement tech is so precise.
Hmm.
And also so difficult.
Yeah,
um,
extremely great game to bring to us, Boyne. Thank you.
yeah, no, it's one. As soon as Boyne mentioned it, I was like, yeah, we'll definitely have to do that one day because the music is really really good. So yeah, we'll move on to the final game that we're talking about today. So a PC Engine game this time, not a NES game. So
Hmm.
the game City Hunter. Um, So it's based on a manga that I've never read, but I do remember sort of seeing it back in the day when I would troll torrent sites for manga and anime.
Yeah.
Is one of those names you'd see popping up a lot. So the music again is the same composer whose name I'm forgetting, Masashi Kageyama. Um, and again, like a very sort of jazz fusion, sort of city pop kind of vibe going with it. It's a side-scrolling shooter, and similar to the previous two games, it really pushes the hardware. I think, like you've got these really really big, well animated sprites, and there's just a lot going on screen at once, and you've got
Hmm.
this really good music going with it as well. As mentioned, as I think you probably talked about during the break, so it's not like a PC Engine CD game, so it doesn't have the CD audio. So it uses the generated audio that the PC Engine can do. But I do like that sound chip. I think it's a really really nice sounding sound chip, and they do a lot to make it really sound really good on this one. Have either of you sort of played this? I know, Reese, actually, you mentioned that you only really sort of heard of it when I brought it up recently. But have either of you
No.
played it or just checked it out? I've only looked at a couple of Let's Plays of it. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's
I watched a Let's Play right before the recording.
fair enough.
Yeah, I haven't. I've been really eager to get like a PC 98 or a PC Engine, some type of NEC, and experience this whole era of gaming.
Yeah, yeah,
God, that
it's
that
it's really
is
something.
yeah, that is the correct. That is a noble desire. I certainly do too.
Yeah.
It is. Tom, right before we were in the episode, started the episode, just said that this is there are no better vibes than this vibe that the PC 98 kind of like 80s 90s kind of like anime type aesthetic, and I got to agree
Mm,
totally. And it really seems like that it's kind of it doesn't seem like a bad game, but it seems like that is a lot more of the appeal of this game is the
yeah.
music and the sort of like the vibes that I presume are from the manga. Um, it's very the funniest part about watching that long play is having some very light sort of like James Bond misogyny in there, where he just walks into a room and this lady scientist is just like, what? Oh my god! And he's just like, oh, not my type. It's like, it, but the sprites are superb, and
Mm,
it's not necessarily, it's kind of proto visual novel esque in it's not like there's a lot to read, but that's sort of like the appeal is sort of like these characters and what they're saying,
yeah.
and in between each level, you sort of learn you're doing a lot of reading, learning about that. I would say even more than the shooting, it's a entering doors simulator. There's so much entering doors and seeing what this person has to say, And
Yeah.
sometimes it's an interesting interaction, or a lot of the times it's just the scientists going like, "Ooh, windy today," and it's great.
Yeah, the one thing that really reminded me of is that GBA game. I don't know if either of you ever played it, called Ninja Cop.
That sounds like a best of the
Which is
worst
one
entry.
of the best games on the GBA. To be quite honest, it's a really good Konami platformer sort of, but like it has a similar sort of thing. This is you're as you're going through levels, you're trying to like free hostages, but pretty much everything you do involves just going through as many doors as possible. And then sort of having your dialogue. So that's the one thing that sort of jumped out at me when I was watching the video of it. But yeah,
Ninja
like
Cop, also known as Ninja 50.
yeah.
I love that.
An absolute banger of a game. If it's one of again a fairly late GBA game, so it was one of those things that it came out late. There wasn't that many copies of it, and is now incredibly expensive to get a hold of. But is definitely worth your time if you have a way to play GBA games. But yeah, I
Re-release
digress. Yes, there is actually. I think my nemesis over at Limited Run Games are releasing it.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
But I know from a long time that Jeremy Parish, who works over there, is a big fan of that game. So I would imagine, if for no other reason than that, that it'll be a decent re-release, or at least I hope it will be.
Yeah. To go back onto City Hunter for a second before we dive in. What really strikes me about the music is this is absolutely an entry into the nostalgia discussion we were talking about before. Not only because of that sort of like retro anime vibe, which is sort of like it's the number one way to amass a ton of followers on Twitter is to just post like clips from 80s anime of a girl fighting in a bikini or whatever.
Yeah.
But also to me it's certainly jazzy, but it sounds a ton like city pop to me. The most nostalgic genre that has ever existed. And I feel like it like I watch it and I don't really want to play it in the same way I want to play Blaster Master and Gimmick. But at the same time, if you just look at it and you're just like, man, when you loaded, I can just imagine myself loading this game if I was one of the blessed few to have a PC engine when it came out. And just being like just swept up in everything and how cool it must be. And it's just like everybody in the comments of the long play was just like, "Oh, we need more City Hunter. This is so good." I remember
Yeah.
said this, that, and the other. There's such a love for the manga and stuff that I think that it really it's really kind of transcendent, at least in the appearing. And the soundtrack is of course great.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on city pop in general, either of you?
I'm a big fan of city pop, definitely, yeah. And like that, it's that that nostalgia thing, and there's I think there's a specific word of it, but like for nostalgia that you never actually had, for like for nostalgia for an experience you never had yourself is yeah. It is definitely sort of soaked in the city pop genre, and like to follow from that, like the when vaporwave and all that sort of draws from city pop and jazz fusion of the era. It's definitely like just drenched in a nostalgia, and like that whole anime aesthetic on like PC Engine, PC 98, just any that sort of like those really nicely drawn bitmaps that are like so low resolution but still incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it is one of the peak aesthetics. All right, so I think we'll jump into the last block of tracks here. So these again all from City Hunter, by Masashi Kageyama. So first track is Opening 2. Then we have Mission Gone with the Beauty. Then Mission Explosion, Rio and Saeko Escape. Mission Escape from Hell, Boss, and Ending number 2. think out of all those, the one that sounds the most like a just a video game song is the boss theme.
Yeah.
It's like even just comparing it to Gimmick, like nothing to do to say like nothing about the quality of either, but just in terms of like the complexity of the composition, and there's like you've got a lot of really busy bass lines going on in there, or like like key changes and chord changes and stuff like that that you didn't really hear in the Gimmick soundtrack, which is a lot more video gamey.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really really cool little soundtrack. It was really fun when I found it. I was like, oh shit, this is like properly good, because I was just sort of going through like Sunsoft games and just trying to figure out what I was doing for the episode, and I just discovered that, and I was instantly just like in love with it. And yeah, it's definitely got like a city pop vibe. I would say closer to jazz fusion in some places, but that's only really if you're a person like me who loves to split hairs about genre stuff. um,
It's allowed. That's what people come to our content for.
Yeah. I don't know anything about the music itself, but I can definitely split hairs about genres for you.
I was
Yeah.
But
reading up on
yeah,
the.
go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
No, finish.
I was looking up the chip, which the Hudson Soft HUC 6280, and it
Mm,
seems like there is an element of the chip shining through as well, because I don't fully
yeah.
understand a lot of the tech here. Um, Boin and Justice are more of our tech correspondents, but they were talking about how like something that was revolutionary on it from the time is that it had like stereo fading and sort of like the and stuff like that. So it feels like there were a lot of sort of like small features that were you couldn't really pull off before, that this sort of chip uh maybe was it's not like a milestone or whatever, but sort of like there was a time when this chip had a lot going for it in interesting ways. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about that and sort of like the ability, the stuff that they're doing with it.
Yeah. Well, I think this is like it's similar to the NES. It's just a PSG, but it's just got more channels. I think is the main thing that it has going for it, which obviously just allows you to get a lot more complex sounds um, out of the sound card, or out of the sound chip, I should say. Yeah, it's like there's six sound channels and a white noise channel, so like seven essentially. So you do get that sort of similar drum technique of using the white noise generator to mimic snares. And like yeah, but it just because of that extra the extra channels, then it just gives you that much richer sound that you can get out. Um, yeah, it's a really cool soundtrack. Again, the game itself doesn't seem super interesting. Aside
Uh,
from the fact that it's got some really good, nice graphics and looks like it plays quite nicely. It seems like a fairly boring game itself to actually play. What were you going to
I
say, Boyne? Sorry.
I cannot remember. Actually, I found it so much more subtle than the other two, which I really
Mm,
enjoyed. Doesn't quite hammer you over the head with its sound.
yeah,
And part of that's I'm sure the technology, and part of that is it's a game about a cop or a private eye. So it's rooted in a little bit more reality
mm,
than gimmick toy stuff or Master Blaster, which I presume is a little spacey and sciency.
yeah.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I don't know about that. Boyne made a couple of interesting discoveries about the plot, which is a there is you are an anti CEO agent, which is currently that as the time of recording that thing just
In vogue.
happened. So it's very in vogue right now, very compelling. And also gave us the opportunity to talk about PCP, because apparently it's about I guess it's about a CEO of a PCP manufacturer. I don't know. But we Tom and I collaborated and we decided that PCP is no good, folks. Don't do it.
Yeah, I'm generally quite liberal when it comes to drugs, but like, yeah, there's a few where I'm just like, just don't even bother. It's not worth it. PCP definitely is one of them.
That's like when you hear about people trying Jimson weed, and you're just like, buddy, just I don't know, don't.
Have some respect for yourself.
Exactly. Just be like, how about you? How about you do the drug called the Lord in church? Um,
There is a have either of you figured out how to regenerate your health in the game?
No.
don't you visit lovely ladies?
You
Or is
do. It's a different type of sin there. You you bust into the room while they're changing, or you visit a nurse. Um, Luckily, the YouTube playthrough channels have bookmarked the specific instances of this. So we get little bunny, we get bath towel, we get naked, and we get bikini.
oh, wonderful.
Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's thank you to the perverts of the internet for that.
yeah. But it's also an anime, so a manga and an
Mm,
anime. So if you can't get your hands on a PC Engine, you could experience the story a completely different way. Which
yeah.
I I assume this takes place in Japan.
Mhm.
The only cop anime I'm familiar with is Mad Bull 34, which is about New York cops.
Oh,
It's quite a bit different.
This seems to be a bit more on the Golgo 13 scale of things. You know, that was a bit more of a James Bond riff, but still,
hmm.
it is this is about a guy who is always dealing with sort of like high stakes crime, always getting into like gun battles. That at least for my understanding, reading up about the anime, anyways. And sort of like it's very much about how he's a crack shot, that sort of thing, and it's and it's got that sort of like that boorish main character who is a
Yeah.
womanizer, that sort of thing, and so it's definitely of a type.
Yeah.
While Mad Bull is just in its own separate. Uh, I don't even know how to describe it. Savage territory.
Yeah, because like the City Hunter's got that like sort of cool guy long coat kind of vibe to the character, whereas Mad Bull is a lot more sort of brutish.
Yeah.
And actually, yeah, that just reminded me, boy, there was a live action movie that just came out this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like a Netflix movie, but I don't know if it's any good or not. But if you're interested in this story other ways,
Yeah.
there's a Netflix version of it that you can go and watch if you want.
And then, if this if you want to explore more about the story of City Hunter, who is every common trope from the '80s in one, you can go
Yeah,
for it.
it does seem like a weird time to make this, especially because it does seem to be quite an accurate um, sort of adaptation of it. Yeah. um, but I suppose yeah, we'll finish up there anyway. With the last track which we've got from Gimmick, which is called "Strange Memories of Death." So before we go, anybody want to do any plugs? Reese, we'll start with you.
Before I may do my plugs, I just want to say that there was a 1993 City Hunter movie starring Jackie Chan, which
Oh,
Interesting. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
oh.
Okay.
so I don't know anything further. I just googled it and I was like, oh, hello. Yeah, don't follow my personal socials. I'm crazy. But you should check out Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth. It's a crazy fun podcast where we talk about leftist culture and politics and video games. And I swear to God, before the end of the year, I'm gonna put out another episode of Existential Warfare. I got it loaded in my editor. I just got to wrap it up with the delightful Conky talking about 3D printing. And I have an episode with Boin on the books,
Excellent.
which I'm excited for 2025. So we'll see. So check those out. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Boyne, have you got anything you want to plug? Where can people find you online, so forth?
Yeah, I think one time, maybe the first time, I plugged the concept of video games. I guess
Shout
I
out
should
to
at
video
least
games.
shout out to video games.
Uh,
You can find me just search Boinsoft at on Blue Sky. That's not my handle, but it's display name Boinsoft. Go ahead and search
Mhm.
it. There's only
it'll be
one
linked.
one of me for now. Thank you.
I will link it in the notes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, talk about tech, talk about video games. And if you want to know about any of that, give me a shout. I'm hoping maybe that is what the existential warfare ends up being about.
Yeah.
But we'll figure that out.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Just to blow smoke up Boyne's ass. I think that she's one of the more interesting people who talk about tech online because I think we all know the kind of person you would describe as a tech dipshit. And
Yeah.
Boyne has a really interesting both cultural and political sort of slant on it. So check that out. Check out she's got an interesting post on her website that's kind of just about her and also sort of open source and stuff like that. So I think if you want the leftist skinny on tech, check out Boyne.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. As for ourselves, yeah, we can be found on patreon.com/CRT Sound System. If you want to go there, you can get some bonus episodes and also these episodes in higher bitrate. You can find us on Blue Sky CRT Sound System on there. Come and join us in the Discord. We're always hanging out in there. Yeah, that's about it really.
Yeah, come on the
Yeah,
podcast.
come on the podcast.
We've got a new Patreon feed that's accessible. Check that out.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the Patreon feed can be accessed on Spotify, which means that you can just listen to the bonus episodes there without even needing to subscribe. I'll probably stick a link in the notes for that as well.
which is weird. Aren't those episodes part of the reason we have the Patreon is because we couldn't upload those to Spotify, but
Yeah,
Spotify
pretty much.
is okay with the feed linking to it from Patreon.
Yeah,
That
it just doesn't like me uploading those episodes directly to Spotify for whatever reason.
awesome,
I
incredible.
guess that they have different rules if it's their own content that they're hosting versus stuff that they're getting from Patreon or whatever. But yeah, not gonna point that out to them unless it's I don't want to be like ruining anyone else's game on that as well.
Yeah. Don't snitch, listeners.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
snitching.
we think you're cool. Don't snitch.
All right, so yeah, we'll finish up with the last track there. As I said, is "Strange Memories of Death" from GIMMICK. Thank you, Reese, as always, and thank you, Boyne, for joining us.
Thank you,
Good
Tom,
night.
and thank you so much, Boyne, for your time and insight and bringing us Gimmick. This has been
Yeah.
such a delight to dig into, and I love it when we kind of draw conclusions that are absolutely correct about these sort of like corners of the internet.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Good night.